Thank you. Good afternoon. One of the greatest gifts my father gave me was my love for Harlem, and James Baldwin made that possible. My father, Arthur Ivanhoe Golden, was born in 1926, a few blocks from where we are right now. He grew up in an apartment building at 300 West 135th Street, now long gone, at the corner of 135th and 8th Avenue. He loved Harlem, and even when he married my mother, Thelma Eastman, who was born and raised in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and they negotiated that bit of cross-borough conflict, and also enacted a familiar migration of that moment by moving to St. Albans, Queens, Harlem always remained Artie Golden's home. When he spoke of the Harlem of his youth, when I was a child, it wasn't specific because it did not have to be. Harlem was the entirety of his universe. My father was the kind of Harlemite that referred to the numbered streets above 100th Street without the 100, because in an understanding of Harlem as the whole world, there was no need for that extra detail. While his stories grew familiar and I could recite the narrative, I had no detail, no context. At that point, I did not know what to ask. The tidbits I gained came from strategic eavesdropping when he would talk to his friends, the extended family of uncles, Uncle Bob, Uncle Marty, Uncle Augie, Uncle Malcolm, Uncle Sidney. These were all men he had known all of his life, and while the specific circumstance varied, they all were, as they would say, sons of Harlem. The words that came from their camaraderie painted a picture of this incredible world they inhabited as young men that profoundly shaped them. And while Arthur Golden did not share the minutiae of his history with me, he consistently shared our history, the history of Black people. And he did this by sharing with me his passion for books. I knew that anything on the bookshelves that housed his amazing library, mostly devoted to African American history, in our den was available to me. Even the books my mother deemed as too adult, my father would discreetly overrule her concern by leaving something like Soul on Ice tucked between my copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and Little Women in my room, lovingly nurturing my voracious curiosity and cultural awareness. I read many, many, many books on my father's shelves, but then I read Baldwin. This happened when I found my father's copy of one of the collections of Baldwin's essays. Not sure which one, because he had them all, but I think it must have been Notes of a Native Son, because I know, like many, I was drawn to Baldwin's piercing gaze in that photograph on the cover. When my father saw my interest in Baldwin, he offered the novel Go Tell It on a Mountain, and then we went from there. And for me, Baldwin became central and inextricably linked to my intellectual and cultural path. A few years later, perhaps a decade, when I was a sophomore at Smith College, James Baldwin came to the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts, appointed with great fanfare as a 5-college professor at Smith College, Amherst College, Hampshire College, Mount Holyoke College, and University of Massachusetts. During his time on our campuses, he taught several large lecture courses and also a small literature seminar. The seminar was constructed very fairly to include 5 students from each of our 5 campuses. The competition was fierce. As a Smith College sophomore who was not an English major, who was not an aspiring writer, but studying art history with the ambition to be a curator, I knew I did not have a good chance to get in, but desperately wanted to be in that room. I don't remember now what I said, but I know I must have sounded so urgent and very compelling because I landed one of those very coveted seats. In that voice that has become so familiar to us all, James Baldwin sat in front of us 25 college students each week. At his direction, we read and wrote and read and wrote some more. And he spoke about American literature, about art, about life, about activism, about aesthetics, and history, and creative passion. and the artists who meant something to him. He spoke continuously through the 3-hour seminar and eloquently about those broad topics while veering into amazing tangents that were filled with references to and revelations about his own writing and life. He also charged us to read deeply, to think deeply, to see widely, and to approach the complicated world around us with rigor and love. While I soaked up every word, I said absolutely nothing for the first few weeks of the semester. I was in awe and therefore terrified and made mute in his presence. This changed one week in class when he spoke of the Harlem in his writing and the Harlem of his youth. In the midst of his talking, he paused to reach for a name of a Harlem place from a moment clearly over 50 years before. And even in a manner surprising for me, I offered it. So he said he was speaking about walking along the streets of Harlem early on Sunday morning, going to church, and seeing the revelers coming out of the many dance halls. As he said it, he said, and yes, and there was one that was the best of all. And he paused, trying to remember the name, and I said, the Renaissance. It happened again, and maybe once again. In these moments, he would look at me somewhat bemused. Right? After a time, I revealed to him the source of this knowledge I really didn't even know I had. I told him about Arthur Golden, and he quickly asked me all the questions that produced the answers, 135th and 8th, junior high school 139. Yes, I know that County Clinton taught there. Did he go to DeWitt Clinton High School? No, he went to Ben Franklin. And on and on and on. When I called home and relayed this to my father, he was amazed, not only that I was in a class being taught by James Baldwin, but also, clearly this was a fantastic validation of his investment in my college education. But really, he was amazed and deeply moved that through Baldwin and all of my new questions that Baldwin's work and my time in his presence provoked, I was getting to know him. In that moment, the love of James Baldwin he gave to me as a little girl when he shared Baldwin's work became ours and became a conversation about Harlem, Baldwin's and his, and so much more that continued until my father passed away in 2015. I left that classroom changed. I went back to art history and added African American studies, and charged by his example and inspired by the constant mention to me of the artist, his friend Buford Delaney, I knew what my life's work might be. I continued to read and reread Baldwin and to revere the art and artists who have changed our world through their words and images. I graduated from Baldwin's classroom, and then I graduated from college and began on this path that has allowed me to live and work in this Harlem, given to me by James Baldwin, given to me by Arthur Golden, now mine. Thank you.